Good morning, and thank you for joining this month's Worksoft webinar on leveraging continuous automation throughout the CI/CD pipeline. I'm Alicia Bell, Senior Marketing Manager for Worksoft, and your host for today's webinar. Now, let me introduce today's speaker. Anand Kameshwaran, who usually goes by his initials AK, has had nearly 30 years' experience in the IT industry. He'd like you to know he's not that old. He just started programming at age 9 and started working for Princeton University at 16. He began his enterprise software career as a software engineer, where he received a patent in virtual cloud networking. AK rose to leadership roles in pre-sales as a strategic advisor for CA Technologies, now Broadcom, focused on cloud and CI/CD. He finally found his true calling in product management. He ran CA Technologies' service virtualization product portfolio before starting his own IoT development and testing startup. He was thrilled to join the team at Worksoft in 2021. In his spare time, AK enjoys making music and riding motorcycles. Today, he'll be discussing how connective automation delivers day zero value for agile teams with codeless automation that flattens the learning curve, allowing them to automate faster, increase efficiency, and drive ROI. Without further ado, let me turn it over to AK.
Thank you very much, Alicia. And thanks to everyone for taking some time and attending. The webinar on leveraging continuous automation throughout the CI/CD pipeline. So I just kind of want to start off for a moment and talk about sort of our current enterprise application landscape. Right. So when we look at most of our applications and that support the business processes that we want to do as an organization, we tend to have, when we look at what is needed to fulfill those end-to-end processes, we have a fragmented application landscape. It is, not only fragmented in terms of the different technology and the different pieces that are needed to accomplish the end-to-end business processes, they're also frequently fragmented in terms of geographical distribution. They're fragmented in terms of the teams who have responsibility for those individual pieces. Fragmented as well as the overall visibility, that an organization has into them. This leads to ultimately a less than ideal experience for both the customers as well as the employees who are serving them using these systems. As this complexity grows, that obviously increases the risk, towards accomplishing those end-to-end processes. When you need to process and order, send it through to logistics, and that goes across multiple systems. Each one increases the risk that you have in really delivering the end goal for your customer. And ultimately, delivery also tends to be a bit of a challenge across these different systems, some of them being more agile and DevOps ready. And so this creates a lot of challenges. And how do we bring all of these pieces together to accomplish what really seems like an atomic and simple goal from a customer or an employee standpoint? Right, so that's sort of where DevOps and CI/CD have kind of entered in as some of the solutions to these challenges. But we really need to start looking more at an overall automation platform, that talks beyond just what we're doing within the kind of development and release space. But so let's think about where we want to go with DevOps CI/CD, which traditionally came really from the development and operations and really focused on that kind of centralized, the technology portion of everything. But when you want to look into that automation platform and how you wrap all this together with the business, you want to be able to look at really that true full business process lifecycle. So you want to, not only understand what's happening from that technical standpoint, but really from the get-go in terms of what were the business actions that we were trying to automate, capturing all of those, making intelligent choices as to what you go ahead and automate, and using that information to feed the overall CI/CD pipeline as part of an overall automation platform. And this helps deliver alignment between business and IT so that we can directly tie the technological and the application components to the actual business function. Automation ultimately to deliver results year after year should have capabilities around self-healing so that you can continue to do your CI/CD cycle and not necessarily have maintenance in between every iteration of that loop. we're talking enterprise applications primarily. So scale, of course, is important, right? We need to be able to manage and test for scenarios where you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of transactions, across tens and thousands and tens of thousands of users. So we really need this to be able to perform at scale when we talk about enterprise applications. And we want to be able to pull that information into a single platform where we can pull all of that information together so that we can make those intelligent choices. But at the end of the day, for an enterprise application, we do need to participate in an ecosystem. So you do want that single platform that can pull everything together, but you need to have the ability to integrate with all of the portions of your IT operations. So an easy integration path is also important, even as you want a single platform to kind of drive everything. And those help drive a lower total cost of ownership when you are able to integrate and use everything effectively together. And finally, as successful automation projects tend to grow. So you want to be able to if you're at the beginning of your automation journey, which it sounds like from the poll some of you may be, you want a simple, flexible licensing plan that lets you get started, do your initial projects, prove success, and then be able to grow from there. All right, so now that we have an idea of what we would like to have out of an automation platform, I want to talk a little bit sort of about our Connective automation platform, where we try to pull all of these pieces together. And so we kind of think around these things loosely organized in sort of these kind of three phases, right? So first, you need to understand your as-is state. Right, you can't figure out where you need to go or build a strategy and the tools that you need to get there if you also don't know where exactly you are right now. So when you look in that overall automation platform, when you understand your as-is state, you are better able to feed in the proper elements to your CI/CD pipeline, right? And as they get into here, and you can start automating the testing and the rollout. This is where you can now, once we've identified those pieces, we can now de-risk our operations by putting in the automated testing, the automated regressions, and kind of covering what it is that we're building, and therefore we can plan for those outcomes and de-risk, the chances of what's going to occur once we're into production. When your automation platform allows you to also then push those same artifacts into production, you again eliminate that risk that can occur with manual steps or the changes that happen when you have manual interventions. So again, you test, once you've done the testing, you have done the de-risking and knowing that it works, and if you can automatically promote those forward, you don't have to worry about any other changes. Finally, once everything is in production, you gather insights on those end-to-end processes, and we can feed that right back in as a virtuous cycle and allow that, and allow us to understand our new as-is state and optimize for the next round of automation, and continue to deliver improvements to the user experience and continue to deliver ROI as you take those early successes with automation and expand them to the next high-value targets within the organization. All right, so again, when I talk about the kind of connective automation in the CI/CD pipeline, I want to just sort of give you a little bit more context, right? So when we talk about kind of the de-risking, that's sort of going to happen here on this left-hand side as we use process intelligence and process mining to understand our as-is state. We then can start to build in, as we document those steps, build in the initial automation and integrations that we need to do based upon our as-is state, so we can test out and optimize those high-value processes that are really meaningful for our business. As we get into this continuous testing, right? And this is probably what we're used to thinking of and talking about within the CI/CD pipeline, which is the actual testing portion that occurs, right, for the automated regressions and pieces along those lines. And that's kind of the heart of the matter. And a little bit later on, I'm going to demonstrate exactly what we do and how all of that plays in to your overall CI/CD pipeline. And then, using your deployment tools, you go ahead and pop that into production. Now, one thing that's fairly unique for Worksoft is we take those same automation artifacts that we used for testing and actually enable you now to deploy those in production for production process automation. And so I think a lot of times when and earlier on in my career, when I was early cloud and CI/CD days, we always our CI/CD pipelines kind of always stopped at deploy, right? And there was the feedback loop that just came back to to the beginning stage, and we didn't really talk a whole lot about what happened in production. And that's just sort of the view that we have from DevOps a lot of times, and this is ostensibly the business owner's responsibility to kind of feed that back. And that's when I talk about where I think the connective automation is so important, is really tying these things back in an automated and quantitative fashion. So within our platform, we also do take a look at those processes as they are executed, and so automate even that entire feedback loop. And here we're really talking sort of in the center space where a little more focused today on what we do in the kind of continuous test space, right? But there's value at each stage along the overall pipeline and within the automation platform. And here I just wanted to share, some of our customers who have been able to find value in each of these places on their own, not to mention that as you pull them all together, there's a lot more that you can leverage and deliver additional value. But, within each stage of the connective automation platform, there's value to be found, whether it is just from understanding your current as-is state, being able to document and explain that just for your own business users, whether it's really in the core DevOps kind of functionality in terms of how do we speed up our testing, get our releases out the door quicker, how do we save time on manual effort that's oftentimes involved, or hey, if your use is really just within production space as a line of business owner, there's value everywhere. But ultimately, I think that the best thing to do is tie all of these pieces together so you can get the insights that you need, right? And when I talk about those insights, one of the things that I've observed, and especially when I was an engineer, is you see a problem, first thing you want to do is go in and automate it, right? When you're a coder, you want to make computers do the things that you don't want to do, but from a business perspective, really the best thing to do, best practice, is understand exactly where you are, look into how your processes play out. And don't mean just in the performance of a particular transaction. This is really looking at that end-to-end process view. So when you have that level of intelligence, this is what helps guarantee that your automation projects are successful. When you automate the right things, the ROI is high. You can easily share that with the business, and the value of what's been done makes a lot of sense, right? And that just leads to high confidence as well as an appetite to continue to see these types of results and automate additional portions of the business, right? So, as you take a look at this information, it's understanding, hey, where are my problem processes? These are the ones I want to test a lot, or maybe do some optimization. Right, you understand, which are the different processes and which are the steps that are used most commonly. Again, those help you really target your automation and feed your pipeline most effectively, with what will move the bottom line the fastest and the most effectively. Right, so that kind of starts with, let's just capture what the business users are doing today. So, instead of having to set up meetings and pull in the business users and the techs and engineers who typically speak a different language and look at the problem differently, you can get your jump start on this by, identifying those processes and then just capture what the business users do today and use those to feed your automation. Then once you have, kind of captured the process itself from what the business users are doing to accomplish their goals, we feed that into our automation. And, kind of that next trick that you really want to have in there is that your automation needs to have a level of self-healing, right? Where, particularly when we talk about packaged applications, there'll be minor changes in the UI or other little tweaks that occur, from one release to the next. And ultimately, those do not and should not really impact the ultimate business goal. But frequently, when we have script-based type of testing technologies, even those minor changes do require that you go in and kind of fix things, right? So you want to see some form of self-healing to minimize any of that maintenance time in between the cycles and as change occurs, you would really rather just have your regression tests be able to continue to run in that same fashion, even if, there's now one new option in a shipping table or something along those lines, right? So within the Worksoft connective automation platform, we accomplish this primarily through something that we call the object action framework, right? So sort of under the hood, when we capture what a user is doing, we have an additional sort of abstraction layer that tries to separate the technical representation, say for the web, things like the DOM or the actual HTML that's being drawn, from what the user is trying to do. They're trying to click on a button to place an order. So as we as we identify and create that little abstraction layer, what it does mean is as minor sort of presentation or other types of changes come into play, we can kind of go ahead and correct and just handle those sort of changes without having to update the automation, and then apply those in other places where that same page or that same step is being used, so that we can update multiple scripts along the way. Right, so once we have our automation and those kind of basic tests working, we want to pop those into our CI/CD pipeline. Right, we want to be able to, once we've automated the tests, we want to automate how we run those tests. We'd like to tie those to our release cycles, preferably in an automated fashion, right, to our Jenkins, to our ADOs. It is good to see, I think, from the polling early on, we have a lot of folks using Jenkins and ADO. And so those are plugins that we provide right out of the boxes. That's sort of what we see within as typical market leaders. However, some of you may have either homegrown utilities. There may be other integration points that you want. So we make sure that we have basically a full-featured API. So later on, when we look at how we do continuous testing with our continuous testing manager, and I'll give a quick highlight on it. This component was built API first, which means anything that you can do through the UI can also be automated through a simple Swagger API integration. So even if there's not a plugin pre-built for the systems that you use today, it is very quick and easy to kind of just go ahead and build out a quick one-off integration, as long as you can make a REST call. And there's not going to be any limitations on what you can do. Everything that's possible that an end user could do, we can script and automate within our continuous testing manager. All right, so a couple of other pieces as you continue through your journey, right? So kind of talked about where we want to start with discovering and understanding our as-is state. Then we automate the high-value processes that we're doing all the time or that are problematic, and automate the testing so that we can de-risk any changes that we make in those areas, or as we make improvements, again, ensure that those changes accomplish what we want. And at that point, now what we want to do within the automation platform is shift right. So I think many of you are probably familiar with shift left, that idea of how do we detect defects and do things earlier within our SDLC to reduce the kind of end impact. So shift right is a similar idea, in that we want to maximize our investment in automation and what we are doing within our CI/CD pipeline. In this case, we want to shift these artifacts that we use to the right. So when we are doing our requirements gathering and understanding our as-is state, we create those capture artifacts, and we shift those right into automating. So we capture what the business user is doing, and we take that same thing and turn it into our automation by shifting that right into into the CI/CD pipeline. Next step that you want to do is kind of shift that right into production, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't create a separate set of automation. You've already automated that in testing. Let's go ahead and shift that right and make that our production bot or our production process automation. This helps address some really key challenges that occur, with a typical production automation project, right? currently, there are oftentimes in the market some challenges around scale and how you scale up the bots or other things along those lines. And since we're using the same engine that we use in our testing scenarios, the scalability and others, we already know it will perform to that kind of scale. Typically, when your production automation is also run as a separate project or is not directly tied to your earlier stages of automation, it becomes the thing that happens next, right? Our DevOps and our CI/CD pipelines are clear, but once you want to start doing those actions in automation, in production, that ends up being a project you can't really start because those are separate artifacts until until the DevOps team is already onto their next iteration and it's in production. This also, so that does not lead to a fast ROI, does not lead to time to value or a fast time to value either. So when you pull all of these things together, ultimately what you can do is you can cut down on the development time. You can cut down on the testing time because you know what you're automating in production is what you've been automating all along, and you're actually reusing those same components. And you can, when you're using, again, those exact same components, you can use that information to feed right back into your process intelligence for the next round of automation, pulling in the direct insights, on what was actually used rather than relying on some external performance monitor or something else to help provide that type of feedback that you now have to map and tie back to what you had done initially, right? So in this case, all of that data is already properly associated and lined up with the business. So we've had a lot of testing tools and and other issues around the within the market, and we also have sort of a separate market that are just starting to converge really around the production automation. And it's it's sort of what are the differences? At a certain point, we're just taking a set of steps a human does, and we just want to automate them, right? But there's a different focus here in terms of what the users expect and the expected outcomes. So, here is kind of where the overall sweet spot is. But in whichever place you're approaching this from, in our scenario, it's really coming in from the testing towards the production. We still need to make sure that we have the security, the governance, the auditability that is needed for production processes that aren't typically needed in QA. And so with one integrated platform, we're able to bring all of those pieces together and provide the appropriate level of control and execution type of characteristics that you want when you're doing it in a CI/CD pipeline as part of QA, or versus when you have extended out into production and you may have credit card transactions that you need to be able to audit and provide information for like PCI DSS or other compliance issues, right? Those are sort of those challenges that you really need in production that are typically less important earlier in the life cycle. So just coming back to this again, when you can bring these various areas together, you really have a truly virtuous cycle that automates not only the kind of heavy lifting that tends to occur in here, we're also able to automate those abilities to gain insights into what it is that you should be automating, what to automate next. And, typically if you're the leader of a DevOps team or CI/CD team, we're very, very used to looking at our ability to move forward from really a cost savings or a time savings perspective. One of the really cool thing is when we can now promote these things directly into production and accomplish business actions. Not only can we look at the automation that we do from a cost savings, a time savings, a faster route to market perspective, we can also look at it as a revenue generation perspective because we're now pushing this into production and actually accomplishing work. Another nice little thing is that it creates the possibility, and it gives you the tools to really end up in a really cool space, right? Where as you implement a good CI/CD practice, tie everything together to move it into production, you now have the tools possible to really get into a day zero production automation, right? So it won't be let's get everything tested, let's get it out into production and update our production automation. And that comes out a couple of weeks later, a month later, or 2 months later, depending on your timescales. This really does give you the tools and the level of automation that you can achieve a day zero production automation. So with that being said, what I want to do is stop showing you slides and kind of get into the heart of the matter, which is, how do we do that central part that you care about within your CI/CD pipeline in terms of providing lights out testing, doing automated testing at scale at whatever time, wherever you want to. So this, what you're going to be seeing here is our continuous testing manager. I'm just going to log in. All right, so as we come in, we can see, the quick recap of what has been done today, and we can come back and take a look, through some of the history over time of what's been done with the system and to get that basic view. Now, before I go to the next step, just wanted to set the stage just a little bit. So here I am really focused on how are we going to pull everything into our CI/CD pipeline and make it a part of our, automated regressions and automated testing cycle. So at this point, we've already had a business user capture, what it is that they do, and we have created sort of those individual functional kind of automations that we need to, for those individual steps and those individual pieces. And now here, what I want to show is how do we pull all of that together, put it into an end-to-end process, and expose that to our, to a CI/CD pipeline or to our DevOps teams. So here is where I can create a suite, and that suite is that collection of tests and processes that make up the end-to-end process that we actually want to test here. So here I'm just going to give our suite a little name. We could set up some tags here so that we can search for these later, right? And for a lot of my customers, one of the beautiful things, especially for the engineers, is they get their nights and weekends back when we can actually automate things on a schedule or tie them directly to our pipeline. And here we can say, hey, where do I need to keep these results stored for later retrieval by lines of business, the people who want to review what has gone on, so on and so forth. All right, so from here, I'm just going to choose a couple of quick processes. What they specifically do isn't really all that relevant, but I'm going to pick a couple of processes that I want to line up and put into our overall suite. And now that I have the things that I want, I'm going to say, cool. And now I can set up and define how I want the overall suite to run. So one, and a lot of this depends on your specific use case. I can say, let me just run all of these tests in parallel. However, if we're trying to emulate a more complex end-to-end process, there's quite likely that you have to do these various steps in a specific sequence, right? So here's where you can adjust from those individual automation components that may have come from the teams building each piece, right? Your SAP team knows exactly what they need to test in SAP. The web front end team knows what they need to test, and we can pull all of those kind of together here. And then, say, hey, what order do we need to run them with? What data do we need to apply for these various runs, as part of that overall test? If we want to be able to modify, let's say if a particular action fails or a certain test fails, sometimes the order that we want to go through these processes to do that end-to-end process changes based upon, a possible failure. Second, what if you want to do negative testing, right? And we want to test a login failure. So we can set the kind of different conditions to control how we create that overall suite right here quickly and easily through the web. Right, I'm not going to build anything particularly fancy in here, but just want to show you that we have those abilities to do that control and really sequence the operations that we need to. All right, so once I'm kind of happy with that, I continue on and say, hey, where do I want to run in the process that I've just defined? Now, if you don't already have a CI/CD pipeline, but you want to just go ahead and automate things through continuous testing manager. One method we can go off with is do a one-time thing, right? So it's Friday evening. You want to have everything run at midnight, so it's being done at a less busy time. You can save on the CPU cycles, or keep them to a more low volume time frame. So you can just set this as a one-time thing. Let's go ahead and kick off our regression suite, at midnight tonight, and I'll come back in the morning and check it out instead of having to stay up to be ready to set it up. But then more interestingly, as we have a release cadence or things like that, Again, this is if you don't have a CI/CD pipeline to trigger those things, we can set up a recurring schedule, right? And set, do we want it to be, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly? Set the time, the different type of occurrences that you may want to set up for an actual schedule. But I suspect here, what we're mostly interested is we want to do this, in conjunction with a Jenkins or an ADO or something along those lines. And so we can set this up as by request. And what happens when you set it to request is, one, where we're not going to go ahead and create the schedule. And you can always manually just go ahead and do this manual request. That's what we're going to do in just a bit. But that also stages this suite to make it very easy to do that API call to go ahead and run this whenever you want. Now, if you're using one of our built-in plugins, then that's right, you're all just ready to go. And if you have some other type of integration that you wish to use, just this is how it sets it up so you can just make a quick API call, run that suite, and pull back the results. So I'm going to set this puppy up for by request. And now we'll go over to set up, who do we provide access to? So if we want to keep, some of these tests just, for specific groups and keep them isolated to, who needs to see it. Oh, sorry, got to hit the plus button. All right, there we go. I'm going to give myself all the full rights. Now I can make this public, right, for the entire organization could view, but I can also control that by users and groups. I'm just going to go ahead and leave this private for the moment. And another piece that kind of helps here is we can set up the notifications that we want for this particular suite. So, and we can determine who exactly we want to send all of those to, right? So we can have a top level admin who cares, and no matter what's gone on, we'll just make sure they know. We can also kind of separate, hey, were there problems within our CI/CD platform, or, and kind of isolate those, as well as then send out the notifications as we want for the actual results of the test, right? So we may want to send specific failed tests to a specific dev team or whatnot, but we give you that flexibility, sort of define those notifications so that the right people get the right information. If a test has failed, but it turns out, hey, there was a network error or something, so the test was never actually triggered. I don't think we want to alert a line of business, hey, we had a test failure because there was an internal system issue. So this, again, kind of keeps the right information and the right visibility where it needs to be. I'm not going to fill in a whole lot of emails just because I don't really want to get a whole lot of emails moving forward. I do a bunch of these demos quite a bit, but I think it's, from a true operational standpoint, these are the little things that really help keep the organization informed and things moving smoothly. All right, so as I get to my kind of final stage, gives me the summary of, what I had set up, and I can confirm that I'm kind of happy with all of that. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell this puppy to run now. All right, so it's going to schedule it up to go run on the next available agent. All right, so as you can see here, the test has begun to run. And one of the things that we can do is, while the tests are running, and now we are normally talking about lights out type of testing. We don't typically want to view, sit here and watch it, but as through some of the early stages, something goes wrong, it can be useful to be able to go in and take a look at what the test is actually doing. So right here, we can go in and get a near real-time view of what's going on in the screen, and really look at the specific machine and what is happening at that point in time. So this tends to come up primarily for debugging purposes if something has gone wrong, but you do have that option. And just to point out, if the test is going across multiple machines, which we're not in this case, this is where you would be able to see the screen of the different machines as it moves on. So while this test is finishing, I just want to show a couple of other quick little things here. I had canceled a test earlier, midway through. And so some of the things that you might want to be able to do when you have a long suite, right? Your regression here, I'm showing you just a couple of processes. Some of our regressions, some of the customers, it's hundreds of individual steps that make up that end-to-end process, say, from order to cash or something along those lines. And just because you have an issue somewhere for these long-running tests doesn't mean you want to start over. So when a test fails, you can just come back here and you can make a decision, hey, do I just want to run my failed test, run the whole suite again? but this is a way of helping pick up where you left off and giving you that ability to kind of make those choices as they occur. So, hey, I'll just tell him, let me just go ahead and run those, just the failed tests and pick up where we left off. All right. So our tests had just completed, right? So I can come in here and get an idea at the top level. These are the individual kind of processes that made up my overall suite. And then if I want to, I can kind of dig in and again, see what had happened. Now, these are, again, pretty trivial processes. So they've only got a kind of a quick single step that's in there, but yeah, I think you should get the point. We can come in here, drill down and see what had happened at each step along the way. And so from there, as our tests finish running, we'll let that guy will finish up in a moment. And I am sure, most of my customers are running a lot more tests in a day than I am doing demos and other things along those lines. But as you see, all of our numbers are starting to climb. And so we can just come right back to our, front line and get an idea of what's been going on, what we've done. And, we have that view in terms of how the most recent regression has grown, and in a very quick and easy way to, share with other stakeholders. Hey, our tests are green, and whether there's anything to be concerned about or look at.
I think that will conclude our webinar. Appreciate your time today. Thanks, AK.
Thanks, Alicia. Thanks, everyone, for joining.